Did Biden win the amount of electoral votes that they said he won, and therefore is the legitimate president?
I think the reason he's legitimate.
Not
There's
the
two
right
reasons.
answer.
He's
crazy.
Can I make an
he's
observation?
Stupid and crazy.
I gotta make an observation here.
You got to decouple.
Well,
from Donald Trump. That's the path.
In this video, we are going to watch Vivek Ramaswamy and Bill Maher go head-to-head. And I'm going to be breaking down some debate tactics, body language, and more, because there is a lot to get through with this one. And I've got kind of a different perspective on this, so I'm looking forward to hearing what you guys think about it. So first, let's have a look at the topic of the FBI as well as Russia collusion in 2016. And watch very closely here how Bill Maher frames his objections every time he wants to raise a point and how Vivek handles it. I'll check in after.
I've seen this before with politicians, when you can say anything, because no one's paying that much of attention, and it's not like, well, he's not going to, this guy's not going to be president. I know he's a kook who thinks we should get rid of the FBI and the IRS, which is kooky.
So you've studied it's not kooky, actually. I'll explain to you why it's not kooky.
It's the FBI?
Yeah, let me explain that to you right now.
Who's going to collect taxes and catch kidnappers? You?
So let's talk FBI, actually. You want to talk FBI?
Oh, jeez. Yes, please.
I'm impressed. No, you've been reading the platform.
I do this for a living.
Hello,
you've been on my show,
this is
right?
Good. Yeah, but
you know who I am?
Yeah, no, I know.
I'm up on political stuff.
Yeah. You're up for the political stuff, but this is getting into the details. So, shutting down the FBI.
Well, that's a pretty big detail. Get rid of the FBI?
Yeah, I would shut it down, and I'll tell you why.
Oh, Jesus.
You ready to have an open? You're an open-minded guy.
I'm listening.
I know you. You'll listen. So that's why I'm bothering with this, right? The FBI is a failed institution. It is at once politicized, corrupt, and has been in many ways designed to be corrupt. J. Edgar Hoover designed it that way. The same FBI that threatened Martin Luther King with suicide, blackmailing him over incorrectly collected tapes, is now targeting its domestic terrorists for people who show up at concerned parents of school board meetings. So in some ways, it's built in by design.
That's coming from the FBI?
Yeah, it's coming from the FBI. Now, here's an answer to this, okay? At the local level, you've got local cops and you've got local prosecutors. You don't have a separate bureaucracy sitting in between. Well, now let's talk about the federal level. You've got the U.S. Marshals, and then you've got the DOJ. The DOJ has its issues, but I think the president can reform that through good appointments. You don't need the separate bureaucracy sitting in between. So I'll walk you through the math, because I know you like details for this to be credible.
Well, certainly for this issue.
Yeah, for this issue, right? Because you brought it up. 35,000 employees at the FBI. 20,000 of them report into work at the J. Edgar Hoover building. Still, they celebrate his legacy. The J. Edgar Hoover building of the FBI they walk into. That's the bureaucratic rot. That's in D.C.
So you're saying 20,000 of the 35,000 FBI men work in Washington in the same... They fit 20,000 people in one building?
I mean, it's a giant building.
20,000 people? In that
I don't know how many of them show up in the post-COVID era for Zoom or whatever, and they have field offices.
Well, that is a big building.
But I'm saying are in back office functions. 15,000 of them are frontline agents. These are good people doing investigative work on drug crimes or sex trafficking or whatever it may be. They're not specialized at the FBI.
So you're saying the 20,000 people who work in Washington, they are all superfluous?
I can't tell you that every one of them to the last T is, but I've got 4 years to first term. I got to move quickly.
Yeah, I think you just...
And so I say chop it off, shut down the FBI, move them to the U.S. Marshals, the Financial Crimes Enforcement Network at the U.S. Treasury, to the Secret Service, which handles some financial crime as well, and then to the DEA.
Okay,
that's the answer.
So here's something the FBI was involved with. I'm asking who would handle this.
Yes.
Say an ally country like Australia.
Yep.
Has a tip, and we trust that they are an ally and the person is credible.
Yep.
And he has been talking to someone who got drunk in a bar and said he had information about how a foreign country, Russia, was trying to infiltrate our election. And he was placed in this candidate's operation. He was an operative for the person running for president. So the Australian diplomat tells the FBI. Do you think that's right?
Well, I think we could separately talk about the circumstances of that particular case. But you're saying somebody gets a tip.
Well, that's how the Trump-Russia investigation happened.
Which, I mean, you could argue this in multiple ways, Bill.
Well, what I'm arguing is this.
You could say that actually is part of the corruption that led to an investigation.
Okay, but what I'm arguing is
this.
Should that not be investigated by the FBI? And if not the FBI, I don't see how the federal marshals or who the Texas Rangers are going to handle that one.
I actually think U.S. Marshals would be a fine place if you move people to that
Really?
division. As a side, I mean, I'm going to resist the temptation to go down the rabbit hole of debating something that's like a dead horse that we needn't beat for what was, I believe, a deeply flawed Russia collusion narrative that went nowhere. But let's just talk about something like it is your question for the purpose of reorganizing the FBI.
We have facts that are, well, at least facts. We have the reports of 2 Republicans, right? We had the John Durham report, right?
We have a Durham report, yep.
And what was the one before that?
The Durham report was about the FBI's.
Horowitz.
Yeah.
They were both about the investigation of the investigation.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
The FBI opened this investigation into whether Trump was too involved with Russia. Let's just put it that way, based on this Australian tip. And of course, it turned out he was. His campaign manager was sharing polling data with a guy in the GRU.
But you know who else was too involved with Russia? Was the Hillary Clinton campaign.
That's ridiculous.
It was via the British guy Christopher Steele with the Russian disinformation operative getting the golden shower story planted down, used as opposition party research.
That's a red
to get
herring,
a FISA.
and
I'm just saying both parties.
Okay.
Politics apparently is far dirtier than I ever imagined in both political parties. And I just don't think it was good for the country, Bill, that we had that impeachment inquiry.
So firstly, it's important to note that Bill Maher does this quite often, where he gives somebody a really hard time, and you don't know if he's actually angry or not, and then he'll randomly give them a compliment and start laughing. It's something that comedians tend to do, so I will cut Bill some slack on that front, because I don't think his intentions were bad. I just think at times throughout this, he's totally delusional. But the worst thing he tries to do in this debate is the conversational bully tactics that he constantly tries to impose on Vivek. And I was actually extremely impressed by the way that Vivek handles himself. So notice that every time Bill Maher raises certain objections, he does it in a way that if Vivek doesn't totally agree with him, it makes it seem like he is crazy or extreme. It's a very typical conversational bully tactic. And then every time Vivek doesn't totally and utterly agree with Bill's perspective, he huffs and puffs and swears and gets emotional. In everyday life, at this point, the person who is on the receiving end of that would probably just shut down and not really get into it because it's not worth it. This person clearly isn't reasonable and they're closed-minded and not really looking to have the conversation. But Vivek, in this situation, can't do that. He has to find a way to navigate this conversation, a way where he can actually get across his point of view, he can stand his ground, he can be assertive and he can be firm, but at the same time also stay classy and tasteful and try and change Bill Maher's mind or bring him around in some way. This is such a difficult thing to do amongst these grenades that are being thrown, but he does a fantastic job of that, and you will see at the end of this video just how that happens. And now on to the next part about wisdom and the 2020 election, which honestly, you could not write a script with a better, more perfect example of projection and hypocrisy. See what you guys pick up.
So my campaign, fully staffed by young people, my campaign manager is younger than me. Talk about the way I've built my companies. So for the federal government, when I think about my cabinet,
have some older people.
A few, of course.
You know, every society.
But it will lean young. It will skew young.
You're from an ancient culture that seemed to understand, like most cultures in the world, the village elders.
Yes.
You know, Confucianism in China. Like most countries revere the elders for their wisdom. It's true. You have a great amount of energy at 38. You're super smart. But I do see something that alarms me, truly.
Fair enough.
Because you don't have the wisdom about certain issues. I don't think you think Trump lost the election.
Well, I think that big tech interfered. You and I have talked about this like a year ago.
What the fuck does that matter?
I want to say
who got the. Of course, big tech interfered. They interfered for Trump. What was that all about? Fox News being.
It's the largest illegal campaign contribution in human history.
Okay, but who actually got more votes?
Biden got, I mean, literally in terms of the number of votes that were counted.
And Biden won the states.
I have seen no evidence to suggest
there none. That's why you haven't seen it. And so Biden won the Electoral College.
I want to come back.
Wait, just answer this. No, you can't come back. You can't play politician.
Well, I want to come back to it after we're done with this.
Did Biden win the amount of electoral votes that they said he won, and therefore is the legitimate president?
I think the reason he's legitimate.
Not the right answer.
No, the reason the election was rigged Big tech. That's really the answer. Bill, and I'm data
doesn't
driven.
matter.
It
Big
does
tech
matter,
is
though.
always, yes, it does matter.
Here's what matters.
But we can't at the moment, it's happened.
I accept Biden's the president, duly elected president of the United States. I said it at the time and I said it now.
Everybody does bad things.
Guys, if you're enjoying this content and if you'd like to see it go far and wide, then make sure to hit that like button just below and subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, because I would like you to be here forever and ever. And ever.
Things during campaigns, including using big tech. What matters is then who got the most votes. We have to start with somewhere that's real. That's what's real. Who won those states that puts him in the White House? And you cannot just say to me, yes, Biden won the election. Because
yes, I said that at the time. I said
so
it at the
Biden
time and I said
won
it
the election.
Biden had the most votes in the election. Biden had the most votes.
Can't say those words. It's like you're a husband who can't say.
No, Biden had. But the reason is, Bill. I mean, there's good data on this. We were systematically suppressed. The Hunter Biden bribery story, which is relevant today,
that's what
on the eve of an election where most people who were independent said, many people who were independent, enough to change the outcome of the election, said they would have changed their vote had they had access to that information. It's the greatest form of election interference in human history.
No,
that's actually the fact.
That would be Russia. If you're listening, please find Hillary's emails and then release them on WikiLeaks. That was the biggest breach. I mean, you can't really believe it.
You're talking about James Comey and his statements before the 2016 election.
I'm talking about Trump. Trump said that. I don't need James Comey. Trump said, Russia, if you're listening. You don't remember that moment?
I mean...
You don't remember that?
I don't particularly remember that moment. But I'm talking about large technology companies in this last election. Okay. I just think if we don't learn from that, Bill, we're destined to make the same mistakes again. But here's what I'll say.
I don't
That's
believe
an example
you
of what you'll call lack of wisdom.
Okay,
and we can agree to disagree on that.
You're running as like, I'm not the bullshitter guy like the other guys. And then you just told me you don't remember when Trump said, Russia,
I actually don't. But
it was a giant moment that's been replayed a zillion times.
Back when I was in business and
you're, oh, really? You were that tuned out from politics?
I mean, what Trump was saying on a given day in 2016.
Not a given day.
Really.
That was replayed a zillion times because he was impeached.
The question is, what's best for the country at this point in time?
Well,
and I do not think that in the middle of an election.
Well, the first thing we can decide, I agree with you that...
And look at the timing of this indictment.
I agree with you that it may prove that we may look back on this and say, because the indictments only make Trump stronger. He's like a rapper. You know, the more times he gets arrested, the more street cred he has. And I think, you know, the idea that Republicans don't like him because they love that the porn stars, they love that he was fucking porn stars. They love to be fucking porn stars, Republicans, gay porn stars, but still.
Amazing. So, Bill Maher tries to make a point about age, and then he invokes ancient Eastern philosophy and Confucianism, and the idea of wise village elders being revered for their wisdom. And then he asserts that Vivek does not have said wisdom, and substantiates that claim by referring to the exact same test that Confucius himself, as well as Mahatma Gandhi, Marcus Aurelius, Socrates, and King Solomon all used in their day. The test that will truly separate the wise from the unwise. As a matter of fact, it is the kryptonite of those who lack wisdom. And that test, of course, is, did Joe Biden win the 2020 election? But seriously, what a poetic moment. After berating him about not having the wisdom, Vivek handled this moment with absolute class, and Bill Maher starts having emotional outbursts and yelling at him and swearing at him every time he does not completely agree with his perspective. And then he finds his way into some obscure tangent about Republicans wanting to have sex with gay porn stars. Very unhinged behavior, and Vivek, you can guarantee, would have been absolutely loving that, because it makes him look like the sturdy cliff face that Bill Maher's waves of emotion are just crashing into. And this just goes to show that even though it is an important factor, age doesn't always determine wisdom. Somebody who's 38, like Vivek, who's well-read and accomplished with a desire for knowledge and good relationships and plenty of life experience, can be much wiser than an old man with none of those things. And now the personal attacks and the animus continue. So watch closely again, because I found the arc of this conversation very interesting.
If there's 4 of these separate things coming right at the same time, smack dab in the middle of an election,
because it happened. It's like they made it up.
But Bill, I just told you they made this one up. They literally made this one up.
They certainly did not make up, excuse me, they certainly did not make up the idea that he tried every single possible way to steal that election. He tried it.
I was talking about the first one, though. They made that was literally made up indictment.
Well, I'm talking about the one that's important, and you know what's important. He tried it through pressuring Mike Pence, who was doing something in a very ceremonial role to pretend that he could change the vote. The fake electors. He pressured the secretaries of state and the legislatures. They talked about bringing out the military. They talked about seizing voting machines. This country has done one thing that was more amazing than any other. They've done many amazing things, but to me, the jewel in our crown, the peaceful transference of power. So many countries cannot get this right.
Yes.
We were one of the few who could get it right. And one guy, your boyfriend Donald Trump,
oh, come on,
broke this and
come on,
fucked
don't give me
That's
the boyfriend
exactly
stuff. Come on. I'm running against him in this race, okay?
I think
I'm
you're
saying
running
this-
to be his vice president.
Well, I'm glad you smoked that view out. I've already said, and I'll say it again, I'm not going to work for any
So
administration.
you would say no to his...
Yeah, I would say no.
You would say no to the vice presidency if
Yeah.
Donald Trump offered it to you?
I don't do well in a number 2 role. I just don't.
To start, you're 38.
I don't do well in. I haven't been a number 2 role in a long time. I think there's a lot of ways to change this country.
Wow.
And each person has to look in the mirror and ask themselves, how do you have the maximal impact you can? So I do it through the private sector. I've written 3 books in the last 2 years. I start businesses. That's what I would
only go right to the top, or...
Well, to me, it's not a hierarchy. It's not about a top.
Well, it
It's
is.
about
You're
where
saying
am I going to
you-
have
you-
the most impact?
You will
is the question.
literally not be the second most powerful person in the world.
If power were my currency and probability adjusting my power calculus, yeah, of course you would take it. But if the question is actually how am I using my God-given talents to have a maximal positive impact on a country that has given me so much, being in that vice president role wouldn't be at getting this done, on actually not celebrating our diversity, but actually finding a common thread that all of us still share as Americans. I think it exists.
Can I give you some campaign advice?
Yeah.
You're such a personable guy. You're so smart, and the energy is amazing. But unless you soften on Trump, at least half the country that knows that he's an obnoxious criminal, they're never going to accept you as the guy who can unite us. I can't accept you as that. The one that I found so chilling, at the beginning, he says, right away, he said, if you saw the lines, I just saw the lines of the people waiting to see me, and there's no possible way I could have lost Georgia. This is a guy who thinks he couldn't lose the state because the lines at his event. This is like me saying, I'm going to be at the MGM Grand September 16th and 17th. That's true. And I could go outside after the show, and I saw the lines to see my show, and there's no way I'm not the biggest act in Las Vegas.
Bill, can I just make an observation?
Crazy.
Can I make an
he's
observation?
Stupid and crazy.
I got to make an observation here.
You got to decouple.
Well,
from Donald Trump. That's the path.
I am running as my own man in this race to lead us to something. You are a thoughtful man. Okay, I am here because you are not shackled by some party's orthodoxy.
Plainly.
Or and anything. And I'm glad that we've done it twice over the last few years, and you've read some of my books, and I've read a lot of your work, and there's so much that we could be delving into. This question of, is there a role for the village elder or not? Interesting. Is there a common thread that unites this country or not? I think that's the most important question of our time. There's room for debate on it. You could just say we're a bunch of 2-legged higher mammals with different shades of melanin walk in this geographic space and do what our iPhones tell us to do on a given day. Is that the country, or is there some set of still remaining ideals that bind us together? That is the conversation that I think we need to have in this country. And yet I'm worried the same thing is going to happen next week on the Republican debate stage that's happening right here, is we are suffering a form of derangement about the recent past that at some point we are all going to have to say we lay down arms and ask ourselves, do we actually want to move forward, or do we actually just want a national divorce?
Yeah. And
do you want the divorce and just be done with it and go home and call it a ball game?
That sounds more like Obama. That was Obama. Let's move forward. Yes.
I don't want to sort of take, and I deeply disagree with Obama and many things, but I know you mean that in a good way. But let us move forward as one nation.
I know you only want to be number one.
I want to unite the entire country. I want to unite the entire country. And I think there's two
you
theories.
Can't.
Well, Bill, I'm hopeful that we can. I think this but I
I'll
share
give you that one, bro.
Yeah, but here's what I would say is 20 years from now, I don't think we can. I think we're in a window where we have a shot
So I'm not going to lie, I actually found it really funny when he said that Trump is his boyfriend. But I'm extremely immature and I love watching politicians have to deal with lowbrow humor. So maybe it's just me. But Bill's point about Vivek having to decouple from Donald Trump, or everyone's going to think he's a maniac and no one's going to respect him if he doesn't do it, is just a very, very clear case of Bill Maher's complete and utter Trump derangement syndrome. And all that speaks to is a deeper issue within Bill that he needs to maybe untangle. And also, it's complete bullshit, and it was proved the other night on the debate stage when Vivek defended Donald Trump and the crowd went wild for him.
I am running for president of the United States. We're skating on thin ice, and we cannot set a precedent where the party in power uses police force to indict its political opponents. It is wrong. We have to end the weaponization of justice in this.
But guys, don't you think it's a little bit suspect how obsessed Bill Maher is with Donald Trump, making him seem like the bad boy? I mean, clearly it stops him from being able to think logically, but there might actually be something else going on there. Maybe it's Bill who wants Trump to be his boyfriend after all. Maybe if Donald Trump rocked up outside of Bill Maher's studios on a big Harley Davidson with his leather jacket on and said, "Bill, get on the back," I think Bill would jump on. I think he'd hold on tight and he'd go for the ride. But seriously, Vivek's response to all of this was quite the masterstroke. Notice that before he comes in with the criticism, he strokes Bill's ego and he compliments him in a way that he knows will be extremely flattering for Bill. He says, "You are a thoughtful man and you are not shackled by some party's orthodoxy," which is a way of saying you are a free thinker. You have the ability to cut through the partisanship. You are discerning and you see things at face value, Bill. This is the ultimate compliment for a guy like Bill, and it's exactly how he sees himself. And he absolutely eats it up. Straight away, he sits up. He's much more attentive, giving Vivek some serious tell me more sort of body language. And he starts laughing and smiling, and more importantly, he actually shuts up for a while and listens. Guys, if you ever want to get a serious point across and you're sitting across from somebody who you know has an ego, stroke that ego. Flattery will get you a long way. But then what happens is that whilst Bill is all buttered up and all giddy about what Vivek has just said, Vivek comes in with the criticism and talks about people being deranged about the past. Very intentional language. He talks about it causing extreme polarity and that it could even lead to a national divorce. Well framed, he stroked the ego, then came through with the point. Now let's watch a few of the highlights of the rest of the interview, where Vivek really starts to bring Bill around to some of his points, and the objections just get more and more weak. It's just a perfect example of the journeyman boxer coming out and throwing haymakers and trying to finish the fight in the first round, and losing the fight to the young blood who is consistent and focused, staying behind the jab, guard up strong, and aiming and firing when he gets the chance.
It used to be 3 to 4 years to build a new nuclear power plant in the United States. You know what it is now? 25 to 40 years.
I talk about this all the time.
You do? Okay.
Well, about like the fact that nothing gets done in this country because these just obscene levels of graft and bureaucracy, red tape. We can't build home housing for the homeless.
Totally right, though, because bureaucracy stops new housing construction. It is the chokehold in our country. So the premise of my, I have two premises.
If you could get through
I'm
that.
the anti-bureaucracy candidate. 70, but you can't be scared when I say things like, I want to fire 75% of the federal employee headcount. I just do. Most organizations.
I mean,
think of your organization.
Government.
90% of the people, 25% of the people do 90% of the work.
No, my operation is lean.
Okay, fine. It's not the federal government.
They're all good.
In the federal government, 25% of the people do 90% of the work.
Because the federal government, of course, does not have to answer to anybody.
And there's no meritocracy.
Right.
Because they have these civil service protections.
There is at certain levels.
Minimal.
And look, there is a lot. I don't know, this number.
If you're anti-bureaucracy with me, join me in not being scared when I say the things that we need to do to fix it.
So let's say you're 75%, which is a pie in the sky wish that'll never come true anyway. So
it's going to come true. I'll tell you.
Not to that number. Let's say maybe you're off by, maybe your numbers in your head are just off by a little bit. So let's say we get to 50%. Like, we don't need half the government. That could be true. That absolutely could be true.
And I've said half by the first year. And so if we discover that's good enough, then great. But here's where I'm at, is that the U.S. president is elected to run the executive branch of the government. And what we have today is a system where the person who we elect to run the executive branch of the government doesn't actually run the executive branch of the government.
That's ridiculous.
I mean, it's just the truth.
How do you know?
I mean, look at what they try to do. I mean, Trump says, I want to fire people. What did they tell him? You can't fire them because there's civil service protections. The law says
I
you
thought
can't
we were
fire
talking
someone.
about Biden.
Well, I'm saying in the last 50 years in this country, the people who we elect to run the government don't actually run the government. That's just a fact. George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, John Jay,
So
if they walk around Washington, D.C. today, they say these are puppets.
Well, who was running the government?
A bureaucratic machine. The laws aren't made even in the halls of Congress. The person executing the law is not the person sitting in the White House. It is a managerial machine.
Okay,
and these are good. I'm not
it's
conspiratorial
just,
about the
you know,
evil intentions. These are good people as level of individuals.
Vivek,
but the machine
you have a good
is
point.
really what's crushing the will of the people.
This is where I think we need a few more years on you. You have a good point, but then you're just so overstated.
I'm not overstating it, Bill.
Say it again.
So the people who we elect to run the government,
Yeah, okay.
they're not the ones who actually run the government.
That's such an
The
overstatement.
laws are not made in Congress.
They're made in
by the
Congress.
administrative
They're
state.
affected by the bureaucratic
That's what it's supposed
state.
to be. That's what it's supposed to be.
Oh, come on.
So I'll tell you. So just get
You're
into the
making
details. You got to get into the
It's a
details.
ridiculous thing to say.
The things that the FDA does have nothing to do with the law that Congress has passed. The things the EPA does to the coal industry have nothing to do, or the fossil fuel industry, have nothing to do with laws that Congress has passed. The Nuclear Regulatory Commission, the reason we don't have a new nuclear power plant in this country in 30 years has nothing to do with Congress stopping it. So if you tell the people of this country we don't have new nuclear energy for 30 years, you'd say, oh, well, the people we elect them out. It doesn't matter who you elect in or out. The fact has been the same for 30 years regardless, because the real laws are made by the administrative state.
Okay. All
Thank
right.
you. It was good seeing you, as always.
Too. I'm glad that we can do this, not agree on everything, and we're still where we were.
We love each other, and we love this country.
Exactly.
And that's what America's about.
Okay.
So I appreciate that, brother.
Good luck out there.
Now, I've seen a lot of people saying that Bill Maher has lost the plot and he's so deranged, and I understand the point of view. But to be honest, I kind of like this, and I don't think Bill Maher's a bad guy with bad intentions. I just think he kind of reminds me of like a grumpy grandpa sometimes, who's overly opinionated. But I do love to see this, and I think that some of the things that he was saying were pretty ridiculous at times, and maybe he had one too many whiskeys. But just think about it for a second. Who would have thought that in this modern day, in this age of technology, in the way that the communication landscape is changing, that we would see a time when presidential candidates are being sat down and yelled at by an angry old man with a cigar and a whiskey? Isn't that wonderful? It absolutely beats the boring, vanilla, planned and scripted interviews that happen on CNN and Fox. It's a breath of fresh air, and we should be grateful for this sort of stuff. It's so much more human. Bill Maher, I think, might have made some mistakes there, but it's so much better than what we've gotten in the past. I see so much value in this, and I want to see more and more and more of these human encounters and debates. So really looking forward to seeing what you guys think about it. And also, guys, don't forget to check me out on other social medias and my other YouTube channels. We've got some good stuff planned. Check me out on Locals as well, guys. And if you guys want to watch another video, click right here. Until next time, I'm Jake. This is Rattlesnake TV, keeping you armed and dangerous.